Welcome, everybody, to another UFO Man Live. My name is Tim, and tonight, before I introduce our very special guest, I need to introduce our panel. To my right, well, my right, I don't know if it's your right, is Nicole Weber. She is the co-host of UFO Man Live.
Please hello and welcome, everyone.
Down below, bottom left, is Nos.
Greetings.
Good friend. Down below, to the right of her is Odessa. She is our chat room maven extraordinaire. So she will be fielding your questions. Please put them on all capital letters so that we can see them clearly, and we will get to them when we can. And to the right of Odessa is my good friend Drew Banky. Please welcome Drew. Okay, tonight we have a very special guest returning to UFO Man Live. His name is Preston Dennett. He is well known within the UFO community. He is a prolific author. He must have written about 35 books so far, I would guess. And if you haven't seen any of his books, please go to Amazon because they're all available there. Are they available anywhere else, Preston?
Oh, yeah. They're in Barnes & Noble, other online retailers. You should be able to find some at bookstores, if you can find a bookstore.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. He is, in my opinion, a historical UFO researcher and an accomplished author and a good friend. So please welcome Preston Dennett to our channel.
Welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome, yes.
Okay, tonight we're going to be talking about USOs or UFO incidents that are connected to the USO phenomenon because they're associated with water. Water being a key component of several UFO sightings and encounters around the world. One of them was an encounter that happened to my old co-host, Tom Reed, on the Housatonic River. They saw a couple orbs above the water, and there was a craft on the other side. So yes, this happens a lot. So without further ado, let's let Preston take it away. Preston?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. This is pretty exciting. Yeah, well, I've been in this field for a pretty long time and almost immediately started getting accounts of USOs, based in Southern California, right off the Southern California coast, is the Santa Catalina Channel, which turns out to be one of the top producers of USO activity. And I started to get more and more interested in it as I got more and more encounters, eventually put out a book about activity in just that area, but was getting cases from all over the world and sort of started to dive deeper, pun intended, into these USO accounts. And I just find them super fascinating. I don't think they've gotten the attention they deserve. And it's really nice to see that there's a lot of attention now being paid to them. And yeah, I've picked some encounters that you actually wanted me to cover. So I've got some really cool pictures that go with them. And we can just go along in order, if that's all right.
Okay.
And
sure.
Yeah, I like these ones I picked because they're really unusual. There's a lot of USO accounts, and they can be
Right.
fairly standard, an object going in the water or out, and doing what it does. But
Right.
some of them are a little bit more complicated. And I like this first one that I'd like to cover because it occurred quite a long time ago. Yeah, this is the location, Georgian Bay, Ontario, Canada. And this was way back in 1914. So well before the modern age of UFOs, which is really unusual because there's not a whole lot of USO accounts way back in the day. But this one, the main witness is a gentleman by the name of William Keel. He was 16 years old and he was out camping with another family. It was late in the afternoon. And he noticed that some of them were staring out into the bay here, as well as a deer was staring out there too. And looking out there, they saw this craft floating on the surface, sort of a bell-shaped craft. And it was fairly large, about 15 feet high, had colored lights on it, bell-shaped. But what's most interesting is that there were some humanoids on this thing, about 4 feet tall, dressed in tight-fitting uniforms, kind of this is weird, iridescent purple-green jumpsuits with sort of yellow helmets. And skinny little bodies, oversized heads, the kind we often hear. And a couple of them were manipulating what looked like a hose and sucking water out of the bay. And I have a picture here which I'd like to show you. You can pull that one down. I will bring the other one up. Give me just 1 second, because there is, in fact, a drawing of this thing. Actually, a couple of them. Here we go. And this is a drawing of the actual object by the witness. And you can see the 2 little guys on top, or 3 and 2 on the bottom. And he's watching these guys as they're just floating there. And this is where it gets so strange, because they're, working on it, and suddenly they don't seem to notice the witnesses. But all of a sudden, I guess they do, because they start wrapping it up real quick, and they're all diving back into the door. But one of them doesn't make it. One of these little humanoids is basically shut out and is hanging on for what looks like dear life, according to William, as this craft rises up about 15 feet and darts off really quick. And this little humanoid is just hanging on for life as this object tilts at an angle, trailing steam, moves off rapidly out of sight. I think a lot of times these objects are coming down to cool off. This is certainly what Dolly Safran, who's in chat, told me. I've interviewed her about her experiences being on board, and asked her about these kinds of cases. And she says, yeah, that's the main reason they go into water. That and to get water itself. So yeah, I like this case because it's so early. It involves humanoids. And I can't say I've ever heard of a case where there's a humanoid holding on for dear life as the object takes off.
Yeah, that's interesting. I noticed that when you said that originally, when I watched your initial presentation of these weird water encounters, when you said he hung on for dear life, and no one knows what happened to him, right?
Yeah, he often thought about this little guy, but never did find where he was. So hard to say, but really, really an interesting story. I love the cases with humanoids because they're not super common when it comes to USOs.
Right.
But this one absolutely was one of them, and a really, early encounter, which is important because we just don't get a whole lot of really early encounters.
Right. So is this what you want me to put up?
No, I'm trying to find the next image. I'm having a little bit of trouble.
Well, you don't have to do it in order if you don't want to. Just grab one and put it up.
Oh gosh, it'd probably be easier for me to do it in order.
Okay.
Because, here it is. This is, I think, what I'm looking for. Yeah. Let me just pull that one up. Take this one down. Okay. Hold on 1 second. And I should be able to get this up for you guys. Luckily, I've got some practice doing this. So there we go. Okay. So this next case is also really unusual. This one occurred at Lake Okanagan. Now, this is in British Columbia, Canada, another Canadian case. Canada, as it turns out, has more lakes than any other country. So it's not too surprising they have a lot of accounts. And this one occurred in August of 1952, when a gentleman, Gordon Sanborn, his wife, Dorothy, and their cousin decided that they would go to Lake Okanagan and take a ferry across the lake. And while they were waiting there at the dock, they noticed what they thought was a speedboat at first. But suddenly this thing comes zooming towards them, and they're all watching it with a crowd of people. And something about it caught their interest because it just wasn't normal. It didn't look like a boat, wasn't behaving like a boat. It was pushing water to the side in a weird way. And it comes right up to the dock where there's like 50 people.
Right.
And this thing then suddenly, when it's about 50 feet away, rises right up out of the water. So, it's 20 feet up and just hovering there, featureless. And they're all looking at it. And in fact, the guy who's standing next to Stuart was using a pair of binoculars. And Stuart borrowed them and looked at it real close. And you could see that it was a solid object. And 100 feet in front of them, 50 feet above the water. And they just sat there spellbound. They could not believe it. They said it was about 30 feet in diameter. They did notice an interesting and important detail, because I've heard this before. They said it was surrounded by a strange sort of haziness, which made it look a little bit indistinct. It was fuzzy around the edges. Now, I don't know if this is its power source or if it's moving kind of slightly interdimensionally, but it stayed there for a good minute. And they all had the real strong feeling that it was looking right at them. And after it stayed there, it then moved off at a leisurely speed, about 20 miles an hour, taking about 5 or 6 full minutes to get to the other side of the lake, flew parallel to that, and moved off. So this is what I would call, and I think a lot of UFO researchers have used this term, a display. It was obvious that this object, or the ETs inside of it, and I'm presuming they're ETs, I think that's the explanation which best fits the evidence, wanted to be seen because it was so close. I mean, there's no doubt. And a real interesting end note to this one is that this is Okanagan Lake, which is super famous because this is where a lake monster lives, Ogopogo. So I'm not saying that's related. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we see Bigfoot in UFO accounts sometimes intersecting. So I think this is an interesting case where there's a cryptozoological connection. Would have been interesting if Ogopogo reared its head at that time, and you could say, wow, look, I saw a UFO and a lake monster. But no, another really interesting USO account.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have a lot of people in the chat today.
Yeah, we do.
If I don't get to your questions right away, it's all right. Let's see here. Polly Rotterman wanted to know, Preston, in that last case, if any ETs were visualized within the craft.
No, they didn't see any humanoids, though they did have the sense that there were humanoids in there. There wasn't any real communication. But there is an interesting thing. They didn't talk about it. And this is something we do see in accounts. Because normally, you'd think you'd see something like this and you'd be really chatty. No. And this is something that turns up, especially if there's humanoids or missing time or it's a much closer encounter. Turns up in sightings too, as we can see here. But it's almost as if they're given the message, don't talk about this. And they actually felt that way. And it was funny because they could not figure out why they didn't talk about it. It's really odd.
Right. I guess when I had my sighting, I was telling everybody and their brother.
Yeah.
If you have a question, put it in caps, and I will try to get it to Preston while he's putting up a different photograph for us. When he's ready, he will let us know, and then we'll move on to the next one.
All right, I'm almost ready.
I'm supposed to ask you about your out-of-body experiences, but since that goes off a tangent here from what we're talking about, you can address it if you'd like to, Preston.
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't mind talking about it. I started having out-of-body experiences following the death of my mother, and became very interested in them because she kept visiting me in my room. in sort of a lucid dream state. And that got me interested in dreams. And then I found out about out-of-body experiences, and I actively pursued it and did the exercises as outlined in Robert Monroe's books, and it worked. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I had my first one. It was very exciting. I had a few more. One was really scary. I thought I had died. But finally was able to do it, reproduce it, and was able to extend them to, first took a year to get them past a minute because I was so excited. I get pulled right back in. But eventually got really good at it and explored the neighborhood, and eventually did see my mom. She took me to the other side, had a big tour of, I guess, what you call the heavenly realms. And since then, I haven't looked back. I've lost a lot of people over the years, and I always get to see them. My dad, my best friend, a couple of brothers, a nephew. So it's awesome. I cannot recommend it enough.
Cool. What patterns or recurring themes have you observed in eyewitness accounts of USO sightings? Do these patterns offer any insights into the nature or origin of these underwater phenomena?
Well, there certainly are patterns. These objects, it's very rare to see an object go into the water and out of it. Most often when someone sees a USO, it's an object flying out of the water. Most of our population is located along waterways, whether it's the coastline or rivers or around lakes. So there's a surprisingly large number of accounts are, in fact, USOs. Often when they go into the water, there's no splash. Same going out. And they can move, this is really interesting to me, underwater at very high speed, pretty much like what we see in the sky, which you wouldn't think they could do, but apparently they have some force field, I guess, or a way of moving the water molecules away from them. You don't often see super large objects coming in and out of the water. They're often, when they do come down, there will be steam and fog, which I think points to them cooling off. All different types of shapes, I can say that. Usually saucer shaped, but you hear every different kind of shape when it comes to USOs. So yeah, these things can go into space, they can go into air, they can go into water, and frankly, they can go through the Earth itself. And there's cases of this, like through solid trees or right into the ground.
Dolly said they are in a graviton wave field.
Yes, I've heard this from many other people. In terms of how they operate, they seem to sort of harness our gravitational or magnetic field lines. And you can see this because these objects will have a weird sort of falling leaf motion. They wobble a little bit when they're hovering. And when they take off, they'll rise up, turn sideways. This is one of the ways I can tell if, it's a genuine account. I don't want to give this away, but too late now. It'll turn sideways, on end. We saw this in the Melbourne High School case at Westall High School. The object lifted up off the ground, turned sideways, and off it went. I saw that in a number of the schoolyard encounters, which was a pattern you definitely see.
Right. I've researched that too, and that's how they naturally fly. They don't fly like a disc like this. They fly like this, belly first. And I know for a fact that happened because I recorded a UFO sighting where it came out belly first from the tree line. So yeah, it's very indicative of the actual way a UFO flies. Let's go on to the next one.
All right. Yeah, this next case is really interesting. And I wanted to include it because it was such a huge series of events. It's really interesting. This one occurred on September 15, 1962. This is at Oradell Reservoir in New Jersey. And that turned out to be an auspicious day because, by coincidence or not, the astronaut Walter Schirra, who was the only astronaut to participate in all three, Gemini, Mercury, and Apollo missions, this was his hometown. And he was coming down to Oradell to crowds of about 40,000 people. And it was that night when this huge wave began. It started with 3 boys who saw this object coming down into the water and quickly took off. And following that, many people started seeing these objects over the reservoir, sometimes on the water itself. And I mean, it started bringing in crowds of people. This went on over a period of a week or so, where it was just going insanely crazy. I mean, hundreds of people were lining the Oradell Avenue Bridge, which goes over the reservoir, to watch these things. And I do have drawings of, here's one of them, but I've got quite a few of these other ones here. Let me speed up to them. Here's one. The witnesses drew these. Project Blue Book was very interested in all these. This was being reported to the police. Police officers were seeing them as well. They were seeing them over a pretty wide area all around the Oradell Reservoir. So there's simply no way you can deny this or explain it away or ignore it. There were so many witnesses. And let's see, I have here a picture of the reservoir right up ahead here so you can see it. There's the actual Oradell Reservoir. And yeah, it's a crazy case. And I find it so interesting that it happened at the time an astronaut was coming to visit. Makes me wonder if that was intentional.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were, I mean, a lot of people seeing this. There was someone who tried to explain it away. They wrote a letter to the newspaper saying, you know, it was us. It was a balsa wood flying saucer filled with helium balloons and outfitted with, you know, a little motor. And it was signed the Bergenfeld Pranksters. But by this point, there were so many witnesses that the newspapers just slammed the hoaxer. Said that the real hoax are the ones who's trying to claim it's a hoax.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting series of events, which kind of got lost to history, which is really why I wanted to profile it, because it's a big event. There's not a lot of cases where that many people see objects over such a short period of time.
Right. Before we go to questions from the panel, Snoopson100 from the chat says, is the no splash because of the shape of their spacecraft?
I don't think so. It is an ideal shape, I think, for moving through atmosphere. But no, I think actually they have a force field around them that allows them to come into the water at super high speeds. We don't have anything that can go into the water like that and out. There was research into flying submarines way back in the 1950s by the Navy. And I suspect they may have something along these lines and have not made it public. But as far as I know, we don't have anything that can go the speed these objects can go, which is really fast. And yeah, I mean, these objects, like I said, can travel underwater at like in excess of 1,000 miles per hour. There's not a whole lot of reports of this, but I have a few.
Okay, let's go to Nicole. Nicole, you got a question?
If it be all right to back you up to the Monroe and your out-of-body experience, and I know that you talked about a little, and I don't want to interrupt the story that you're telling now, but I was wondering if you could go a little bit more into that and what it's like when you travel, or how you think that it interlinks with all of this in your connection with experiencers.
Oh, it absolutely interlinks. I don't think it's any coincidence I started having these experiences right when I started investigating. They came hand in hand, and I've talked to a number of people who've said the same thing. I mean, there was a guy who had a close encounter with his plane where 3 discs came around it. He landed, this was in New Mexico, and was questioned by these intelligence officers who asked him to describe it in detail, just real quick. And they asked him, well, have you had any out-of-body experiences following your sighting? And he looked at them like, oh my God, how did you know? Because he did. So yeah, I think UFO contact can sort of, how would I put it, enhance or spark a person's psychic abilities. And astral projection is one of the easiest to learn, and it's super fun. I mean, when I do it, it's just a process of relaxing, both physically and mentally, and then you do visualizations. You want to get to the point where your body feels sort of numb, you feel movement, maybe heaviness or lightness. Ultimately, you want to feel what's called the vibratory state, where your whole body vibrates like it's electric. And once you're there, you're ready. And the things you can do. I mean, in the beginning, I was pretty nervous about it, and I had to learn how to move and stuff. But first thing I did was start walking through walls, stuff like that. So cool. And
Yeah.
then,
That's awesome.
yeah, flying around, that's worth the price of admission. Flying over the LA freeways, it's crazy. Visiting friends' houses, no one could ever see me. I would try to show myself to friends and family. Finally was successful with that, but it took years. But ultimately, all the fun is on the other side. Because when my mom showed me the heavenly realms, man, oh man, you don't have to fear death at all. It is so beautiful there. It's very much like here, but everything glows with this inner sparkly light, like diamonds. I mean, it's exquisite. It's like high definition. The colors, the blue is so blue, the reds, the
Yes.
greens, and the love that just permeates you. It's unbelievable. But you can learn about your past lives. You can visit enlightened masters. Oh my God, going in front of these people who are full on enlightened. I mean, it's hard for me not to fall down to my knees in front of them and go, oh my gosh, no, I'm not worthy. But yeah, you can meet spirit guides. You can talk to them, go to temples of learning. I would do that and learn telekinesis, because telekinesis is a natural skill on the other side. But healing temples as well. I mean, all the stuff you can do is amazing. For me, the most fun is visiting deceased loved ones, which includes pets, by the way. So that is so rewarding when you have someone who's passed on, and it's so devastating. And you can go and actually meet and talk to them and see what they're doing. And they're always, well, almost always happy, really happy. My friend Roger, he died of alcoholism and had a real hard time with it. And he was in a dark place, what we might call the hellish realms. I ended up exploring those at one point because, you know, I read about it in other books. I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Also, you rescue lost souls. There's a lot of earthbound souls down here. I mean, I love talking about astral projection. So you'll have to stop and go on.
Before we go to Drew, Polly Rotterman wants to know, how do you know you can come back from that state?
Well, it's easy. The trick is staying out. Good luck when you're a beginner, because you'll pop out and you'll go right back in. We have a silver cord, what's called a silver cord, which attaches to our physical body. It's an energetic cord, and it will pull you right back in under the least provocation. If you get even a little bit scared or excited, and you can pull yourself right back just by thinking about your body. And there's various techniques like opening and closing your hands, or thinking about your body, opening and closing your eyes. You can sort of feel it too when it's time to go back. There's no danger of getting too far out or lost or possessed. We're all doing this every night. And most astral projectors will tell you that. It's as safe as sleeping. It honestly is. There's no real danger. It's the opposite. I've found about 20 or 30 cases of people who are physically healed. So, I mean, of all kinds of stuff. It's crazy. Multiple sclerosis, liver disease, cuts and flus. I mean, it goes on. And what's the best part, honestly, is it wakes up your psychic abilities, because you come back and you're like telepathic, clairvoyant, precognition. It's crazy. I mean, it came on me at full force. I was not prepared, because that wasn't in a lot of the books. But I love it. It's so much fun.
Do you ever give, like, I've gotten about all the way out, except for, like, I mean, literally I had my hand, like my arm. It was just like, I was, you know, I couldn't get past that point, but I have had different experiences like that. I would be interested to know and chat with you sometime on the side, because to hear you talk about it is just absolutely fascinating. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I have a little guidebook that I send out to anyone who wants to do it. It's 2 pages. I'll end all the steps in detail. I've taught workshops on this. If anyone wants me to send them the guidebook, just email me. My email is super easy to remember. It's PRESTONUFO@gmail.com. And we can start from there because I have no problem, teaching people how to do this. It's
Oh yeah.
well
Yeah,
worth
you can send me the book. We'll all be flying around together.
it.
Did you
I've
try
done
the
it.
lights, or to flicker? Are you able to manipulate anything from that side over onto this side?
I'm sorry, what?
Can
Like,
you
are you able
flicker light bulbs?
well,
Oh,
you're not saying like the parlor games, but are you able to manipulate any energy from, that side onto the side?
no, I'm not that good. I've tried moving objects, and I've gotten some advice on how to do it, and I haven't, developed to that point. Dolly in chat, I saw her. I mean, she saw me as an apparition. I saw her. We've had out-of-body experiences together, and she's had some experiences along those lines. She's pretty good at it. And I know other
Come
people
pick
who
me up,
able to move
Dolly,
objects.
next time you go. Yeah. No, I was gonna ask that, but yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Thank
very
you.
cool.
Holly Rotterman says, cool, you got a student here. She lives in Israel, so it's going to take some postage. Yeah. Anyways, next to Drew Banky. Drew, what do you think about this?
Wow. Yeah, man. I see you, Preston. We're on the same wavelength. I got 2 books and work with psychedelics a lot, and didn't start having UFO experiences till after the psychedelics. Like, the psychedelics opened me up to that. And then after having different experiences, things have turned on for myself, such as telekinesis, and had lots of proven out of body experiences that's had proof to connect back to the physical. What part of this disclosure process do you think is the consciousness part? I mean, this is like my favorite conversation, by the way. Like, the nuts and bolts is cool, but the consciousness part of it, for me, I believe is like the whole point of all of it. Because I think one of my stances is, I also want to thank you for voicing the magnetic part. I've been talking about that for a while. There's so much proof about the 30-second parallel and other meridian points around the Earth, and how the planet just mimics us and our meridian lines and all that, our energetic lines on us and everything. So I'm totally with you on that, and totally, with you on that 100%. One question on that, to follow up, after the consciousness part, how do the ships navigate once they get off further away from planet? Do they still use magnetic movement, or is there some type of movement that takes place once they get a certain distance away from the Earth?
Right. No, it's a different mechanism. Oh gosh, I wish Dolly was on because she could explain this in such detail. We went deep into it in our book Symmetry, which profiles her experiences. But I've heard this from other people as well. Yes, they use the magnetic field lines when they're, traveling planetary, around Earth or another planet, battery power, so to speak, and electricity. But when they're traveling interstellar distances, they're not, opening a portal, as often has been called. What Dolly calls it is a light gate. And they explained it to her in detail. Basically, using very, very high amounts of electricity, they're able to access a higher dimension, a higher dimensional space. And the craft moves into that. And because space is basically, distance is an illusion on the higher dimensions, if you know the location of any other spot in the known universe, you can go there instantly. So that's, in a nutshell, very simplified, how they travel interstellar distances, and they can do it in literally the snap of a finger.
So what you're saying, there's meridian lines in the universe that they use, just like meridian lines on Earth and meridian lines on us.
No, I wouldn't say that. They have a way of just identifying a location. Dolly could explain this better, honestly, but once you know a location, the craft are flown psychically, and the craft itself is a living being. I've had a lot of people tell me this, and some just had that impression. Others were absolutely certain. Others had it talk to them. I was so glad when I found Dolly, because her case is the most extensive I've ever had the privilege to research. She was able to fill in those blanks and connect some of the dots. And she explained it in detail that yes, these craft are alive. They're embodied. And, Grant Cameron, a great researcher, just put out a book called Sky Pilots. And he said every single person he's interviewed who's flown a craft, and there's a lot of them, this is not as unusual as it might sound, they will sit you down in the pilot seat and teach you how to fly these craft. It's done psychically. So it's more along those lines. Their technology is very much psychically driven.
I'm with that. Yeah, Grant Cameron was one of my big first interviews back in the day in 2019, and we talked a lot about that from my experiences. But yeah, it's amazing, man. I guess I don't have anything more right now. I'm kind of blank. So appreciate you. Thanks for being here. I see you, and definitely, yeah, the consciousness part of it. I think that's the whole point of all of it. I think the experiences when we see crafts, I think we're actually seeing another bilocated part of ourself, really. And I think we're coming back to remind ourselves. So thank you for being here.
Okay,
Yeah.
we do have a question from the chat room from Michael Kennedy. What insights can the study of consciousness offer us in understanding the high strangeness cases associated with UFO encounters and ET phenomena, and how might this knowledge influence our perception?
Michael. Hi, Michael. He always asks the deep questions. Yeah, I like this question, actually, because this is something I have looked into. What's really interesting about UFO encounters is they do often have high strangeness. And there's elements to it that are very just bizarre and outlandish and really force people to stretch their minds and perceive things in a different way. I think it forces people to consider new paradigms, to really think outside of the box. So it has a huge effect, almost as a rule, on a person. A simple sighting even can affect a person mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychically. I mean, on multiple levels. It's a superlative experience in their lives. It's a peak experience. That changes everything, how they view themselves in this universe. And as disclosure happens, I think we're going to see more of a shift towards studying consciousness. Because this is, CE5s. That's part of the forefront of UFO research, calling down UFOs, initiating them. And that's done mentally. Whenever anyone has UFO contact, communication is almost always telepathic. And this is one of the ET goals, missions, is to wake us up to our own psychic ability of astral projection and mediumship and clairvoyance and remote viewing and healing, physical levitation. I've talked to a bunch of people, sounds crazy, who have physically levitated following their encounters. This is not a beam of light lifting you up. This is learning how to levitate like yogis do. I wrote a whole book on levitation. It is real. It's been proved in a laboratory setting multiple times.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, it's all connected to consciousness.
I've had multiple sightings. I had even a face-to-face near Chaco Canyon, but me and my wife, I've had a few shared encounters, especially with my wife. We're together all the time, but we had a shared encounter on the way to go. She was in labor, and we were on the way to the hospital to have my son, and there was a ship flying alongside us in the field about maybe 1,000 feet off the roadway, flying horizontal with the road at night. And I've talked about this before, and then I believe that was my son. My son came on 1/11 of 2022. So it's just the further you get along in this, the onion keeps unfolding over and over and over again. There's never ending to it. There's always a surprise around the corner. So
I had a crazy UFO, so if I may,
please do.
I've had a number of sightings over the years, and sometimes they'll communicate with you. Once I'm driving, this is so crazy. I'm driving from San Diego to LA late at night, and I see this giant globe over the freeway. I'm like, what the heck is that? Is that a street light? It clearly wasn't. I mean, it was huge.
Right.
And this is this is the 405 freeway. No, let me think of it. The 5 freeway.
The 5, okay.
Which is busy, even late at night. And there's, we're racing along at like 65, 70 miles an hour. And there's a low cloud ceiling. So whatever this is, it's below 1,000 feet. And as I got closer, it was right above the freeway. couldn't have been more than a couple 100 feet, I think. Not sure because I couldn't tell how big it was, but it looked about as wide as the freeway. And I'm getting right under this thing. I didn't stop. I should have, but you're on the freeway and there's cars racing all around you. It's late at night. And as I get under this thing, I'm like, wow, it's not attached. It's not a street light. I don't know what this is. It's a UFO. No one else seems to notice or care that it's there. And as I get, I'm looking up and I'm right under it, I get a message. And it says, your niece, no, not in English, but a knowing. Your niece has just been born. So that's how I know her birthday, July 9th. I'll never forget it. And of course, that turned out to be true. And it was the coolest thing. Her mom did have a very close-up encounter with grays and a UFO sighting. Her brother saw a UFO and a humanoid. So it's sort of tracking the family as they do. But yeah, there's this weird connection to, they will announce a birth. So I was really interested to hear you say that, Drew.
Yeah. I think it's, I see them more as ancestors. I'm deep in the Native American belief and spirituality and stuff like that. So I see them as ancestors. I don't see any disconnection from them really. So I think it's beautiful. But yeah.
I've heard that before. We are you, you are us, we are one. This is the message many contactees get. We share a common heritage. We ourselves are of ET heritage. And there's human-like ETs out there that look just like us. We're all very much the same, more alike than different, I think.
Yeah.
I was going to say, comment from the chat room, Chronicles of Stillwater says his birthday, or their birthday, is July 9th.
Ah, very cool. Auspicious day.
My birthday is the day of the Phoenix Lights.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of unusual considering I'm UFO man. All right. So let's go down to Nos. Nos?
I want to know, first off, I know you're telling the truth. It's those who do know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And so what I'm looking for from you is when you think about the collection of experiences and the people that have been drawn to share their story with you, and you look at the big picture there, what is the message that the others are trying to share with humanity that they're just not getting yet?
Oh, I think it's multi-layered for sure. The first and simplest message I think that the ETs are trying to get across is that they're here. We're not alone. That simple, because they're showing themselves to small groups individually, one by one, to larger groups, and sometimes these waves of sightings, which are honest to God displays. Beyond that, I would say it's to leave fear behind and other negative emotions. They seem to really want to work hard with that. That's the first thing I always tell people when they see them. Have no fear. No, don't be afraid. No harm will come to you. You're okay. Everything's fine. We're not here to hurt you. So I think that's a real important message. I think they really want us to understand that we are connected to them, that we do share a common heritage, as I've mentioned, and that beyond that, that we are eternal beings, that we do survive death, that we have past lives, that have all the power of the universe within us. So it's all about that as well, waking up to psychic ability. They're trying so hard to make us telepathic, which would change everything. And another very prominent message, because you see this with almost every contactee who has any kind of communication, are warnings and messages about our environment. They're very, very concerned about how we misuse nuclear material in any form. Because apparently, and many contactees have been told this, when we explode bombs, nuclear bombs, it rips holes in other dimensions and is destroying areas we're not even remotely aware of. And they keep saying it over and over again. Grays, mantids, tall whites, little blue beings, all of them Same message. Stop messing around with nuclear power. And beyond that, it's, war and aggression, greed, corruption, destruction of the environment, chopping down of forests, polluting of rivers. All of these are very much a concern to them. So I think those are the main messages they're trying to get across. Simply, we're here. You're not alone. You're going to be fine. You survived death. Got many, many abilities. And stop killing yourselves, each other, and your planet.
Then my follow-up question is this. We know that's their message. It's always been clear, right? All of those parts of it. And it's anyone that's keeping track of the legitimate occurrences, it always comes back with this as the result of the information gathered. And knowing that that's the case, why do you think the public is holding back so much? What's keeping them from reaching out for hope?
Gosh, I wish I knew, and I'm going to blame our, secret governments, the cabal, the one percenters, call them what you will.
Yeah.
We're drenched in fear in this society.
Oh, yeah.
The media is so fear-based. We're taught to fear anything different. We're being poisoned by people who are supposed to be taking care of us. There's poison in our food.
So true.
Oh, yeah.
So true. Food, water, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Crazy.
If you go to the grocery store, please do this.
Don't get me started. It's
Look
not.
at the ingredients.
Yeah.
Half the stuff is now GMO, genetically modified.
Mhm.
And I don't think we should be eating that. The animals won't eat it. Monsanto, I'm not happy with that company. They're trying to take over.
We know I'm there. Yeah.
So, there are things people can do. And the problem is we are all victims of this ruthless, brutal, very well-funded, very carefully orchestrated cover-up of UFO information, and beyond that, a disinformation and fear campaign. This is what the ETs are trying so hard to counter. We need to move past fear. We need to stop trusting our, leaders who are lying. We know they're lying. We can prove it. So it's time to just, we don't need disclosure from them.
No.
There was a case in, I think it was North Carolina, where the guy asked the ETs, why don't you just show yourselves and, disclose? And this was back in the 50s or 60s, I think. And they said, we already have. We have.
Repeatedly.
It's true. How many waves of sightings do you need? They flew over the Capitol. Right? They practically landed on the White House lawn. It's so cliche, but they practically did it in 1954.
When they flew over? Yeah.
Yep.
But I think in their, in the general public's idea, they think that ET is going to visit the White House because in their mind, that's who's in charge of the earth. But in the ET's mind, they don't see it like that. They see the spiritual leaders and the wisdom keepers as the actual leaders of this earth. Like they see it in a different way because they see the energy in a totally different way than what we can.
Oh, I totally agree. Because if you look at who's having contact, I was looking into this because I'm like, why are some people and not others? It's evenly divided between men and women. It's people of all ancestries. It's all over the world, of course. It's been going way back. I found three main patterns, and certainly not political affiliation or education or religion or anything like that. One is, of course, it's generational. They do seem to be following certain family lines and upholding their genetics. Another is they're very attracted to people who are profoundly psychic and will, of course, elevate that in people. It's a kind of a two-way street there. But to me, the most interesting pattern is that they are basically working with people who are doing work for the betterment of humanity. And if you look at contactees, you'll see this. They're environmentalists, they're social workers, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're musicians. So many musicians. But yeah, people who are working really hard to uplift the humanity in some way. So that's a really prominent pattern, and seeing it more and more.
I was a nurse for 23 years.
There you go.
So there you
I'm
go.
going to totally jump in. I'm taking my chance. All right. I'm jumping in. All right. So two things. First off, a secondary question. As far as sightings on 18 wheels, he wonders why aliens won't just come on and tell their side of the story on the show. I will point you to the episode with Nos. Check them out. Just saying, check those episodes. Also, for the people that we have in our audience, we have a lot of people that are not in the U.S. Could you, if they email you, can you send them a digital copy of your pamphlet, that two-page pamphlet?
Like a PDF.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know it's absolutely available. You can.
Yeah.
We'll send it to you.
Absolutely.
And I just posted his email just in the chat. I'll do it again here in a second.
Yeah. And be patient
Thank you.
with me because I'm getting like 300 emails
Absolutely understand.
sometimes per day. A lot of it's junk. So I'm
Yeah, of
weeding
course.
that out. But yeah, it sometimes takes me a day or two or even longer to respond.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy to do it because I think it would change the world if everyone learned how to do this. It
I
changed
agree.
my life. Oh
Yeah.
my God, it's so much fun. It's so interesting the things you can do at night. You know, I don't look at going to bed as falling unconscious. It's like, what's my adventure going to be tonight? It's so much fun.
Well, this
Thank you.
conversation took a definite turn. I do appreciate the fact that we're talking about something other in a different direction. What I'd like to ask you is this. Can you have an out-of-body experience starting from a dream state?
Oh, 100%. In fact, that's one of the easy ways to do it if you're beginning. And there's multiple ways of doing this because one of the best things you can do is when you're in a dream, and you can do this while you're awake too. And in fact, I'd recommend it. Look around for any inaccuracies, anything that's out of place, something that just doesn't fit the laws of the universe. So you might be in a dream and you've got a window where there isn't one, or the driveway is facing the wrong way. Or for me, it's a celebrity. I'll have some celebrity walk into the house. I'm like, what are you doing here? And it wakes you up. And suddenly you become lucid. And a lucid dream is when you're awake in the dream. And that is essentially an out-of-body experience, though you're still dreaming. But that's an important step because then all you have to do is a couple of things. You can spin and it will cause all illusion to disappear. Or you just shout out a command and say, all illusion end. I was given that advice by a spirit guide because I was lost in a dream and I couldn't get out of it. This guy shows up and says, this is what you need to do. Just say these 3 words because I was kind of stumbling on how to do that. But dream work is a great way to do it. Keep a dream book by your bed. Do everything you can to remember your dreams. And if you can get to the point where you're remembering 4 or 5 dreams a night, you're there. You're ready. You're so close.
Cool. I just wondered about that. Okay. Would you like to go on to your next story about the USO connected UFO that you got down here?
Yeah. This is another really interesting case, which I covered because it's different. And you can pull up that slide if you want. Yeah, this one occurred on October 31st, 1963. And this is in, I might butcher the name, Iguape, Brazil. And it was reported by two Coral Lorenzen when a bunch of people in this area saw this flying saucer come over this river. It made a loud roar. It actually chopped off part of a palm tree, dived into the river and sank. And some 20 or 30 people saw this thing. So this was quite a few people who saw this, 50 people actually. And this thing sank into the river. Of course, the government became involved. They immediately showed up and tried for 3 full days to get this thing out of the river and could not do it. Unfortunately, this river, which isn't really that deep, I mean, it's about 12 feet deep, but it's got 15 feet of really deep, squishy mud.
So
This was a big craft, 16, 20 feet wide or so, a 3-foot high dome. And They tried everything, divers, metal detectors. And after about 2 weeks, they just gave up. So probably this thing just, took off in a different direction, or maybe it's still down there. We don't know, but it's a really odd case because this disc, according to the witnesses, was in trouble. I mean, it looked like it was out of control, moving in all kinds of different patterns, was not doing well. And yeah, that's the Parapova. I'll call it a UFO crash because that's what it looks like. But a really interesting case, to say the least.
Although it may have submerged down into the mud and traveled through that medium, being that don't they use a kind of like a transphasic technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's very advanced. I'm not exactly sure what they're using, but they could, if they wanted to, just, I think, turn interdimensional or go right through the ground itself. Very hard to say exactly what happened to it, but certainly I think they're very, very advanced.
Polly Rotterman in the chat suggested maybe they use an invisibility cloak.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely possible because there's many, many cases of this. There was a case in Colorado where a UFO appeared on radar and was hovering over the base, and nobody could see it, but it was appearing very clearly on radar. And many, many cases like this. I interviewed a group of teenagers, and only one of them could see this UFO. He's trying to point it out to his friends. He's like, it's right there. This was close, a couple of 100 feet away. Could not see it. He was the only one who could see it. It's very, very odd.
What I find out also is if you have 6 people standing in a row and they all see the same object, but you get 6 different descriptions.
Yeah, that's another thing that's hard to wrap, my head around. I don't know quite what's happening in those cases. We do have a tendency to view things through the lens of our own belief system. I think that's part of it.
Infiltrate.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they can basically make themselves look
Real.
how they want you to see them. So they might appear as a plane even, or a helicopter, or a tree, or anything. Dolly Safran talks about this in our book Symmetry. She says, well, you can kind of compare them to a cuttlefish, which can, like a squid, or a chameleon, which can take on this is how they turn invisible. I think they basically take on the appearance of the sky itself.
Sounds plausible to me. Do you want me to put this next image up?
Yeah, this is another really interesting case, which I like because this one came from Aufhaufen, Germany. And I think it's important that people realize this is all over the world. And this occurred on April 9, 1970, and involves a gentleman by the name of Max Krauss, who is a good witness because he is an engineer who's very familiar with machines. And he was walking by near his home in Aufhaufen, and there was a little stream next to the river, and he saw this kind of spherical object. A sort of transparent sphere, he said, maybe 2 feet wide, with these 8 gray-green spokes radiating out from the center, as you can see here. This is a drawing of it. He said it looked like it had almost a prism inside, and it was spinning. And he walked right up to it. And he says he was not frightened, just very astonished, very curious. And he wanted to walk right up to it and touch it, but he decided that might not be a good idea. But he watches this thing kind of sent down this little tube and started sucking up the water. He said this little pipe was wiggling around like a worm, kind of, or a hose, and pulling up the water. And he watched this for a few minutes, and it went into the center of this craft. And he says at this point, it started to glow bright, bright blue, kind of like being ionized, he said. And then it started this rotating, gliding movement, moved right next to him, and then went straight up in the sky super fast. So fast for a second he thought it vanished, but he did manage to see a tracer of it as it went straight up. So yeah, he didn't have any other witnesses with him, unfortunately, but a professional electrician with 40 years of experience. I wonder if that's why perhaps they were showing him, because again, this was so close. It had to be aware of him, and was collecting water. Water, I think, has a lot of uses to any entity out there, but a really interesting and unusual case, to say the least.
Okay, here. Let's go to Nicole.
I would like, Preston, if you would, I know you talked about similarities between, like, I'm going to go off topic. You know what? I shouldn't.
No, really?
I know. I like, you know what, though, if you could continue, like, kind of with the story and your, like, personal connection with all of it. Like, I know you got into it, the ET. There was actually someone, Fred Zhao, he asked a question earlier, and maybe we'll go that route. He wanted to know about what you thought of negative ETs and, you know, what, I guess, if you've encountered any or what those look like to you.
Well, this is a very controversial topic because I've interviewed a lot of people, and I got involved in this field as a skeptic, and I bought into the sort of fear-based narrative that the media was putting forth. I thought, this is terrible. People are being kidnapped against their will. They're being tortured by emotionless, gray, monstrous-like ETs who are stealing babies and doing hideous experiments on them. And I started interviewing people, and that's not what I found. In fact, the first case I found was a lady who was healed of a cyst. I thought, well, that's certainly interesting. The second one involved this lady who had repeated contact with grays, who started giving her information about her personal life, you know, predictions that she would get a raise at her job, that about her, what was going on at her church, and her relationship with her boyfriend. So I started really focusing my research on people who've had direct contact. And I have to tell you, I don't get a whole lot of cases really at all of what I would call ultra negative contact. And I'll get to the point of what I'm trying to make here, because I've already said, you know, when someone's taken on board, they're physically examined. This is very common. This is often when they're healed, but this can be terrifying. And when someone is in abject terror, it's a negative experience for them, especially, if it's their first experience. And
Right.
when you're in terror, you can't perceive very well. You'll probably have missing time, and that's all you're going to remember. You're like, this was a negative experience. I hated it. I don't like it at all. And that's the worst I really hear, honest to God. But once a person moves past the fear, they'll be physically examined, perhaps healed, taken to the engine room, shown how it works, taken to the control room, shown how they fly the craft, taken to the observation deck, shown, a star field perhaps, or the earth below. They'll be given messages, which we already talked about. It becomes a very enlightening, sort of spiritual enlightening, psychic awakening experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take an objective look overall at most onboard experiences, I'm very encouraged by it. Not to say
Absolutely.
that I've interviewed people who've had negative experiences. And I'm sure you've heard of MILABs, military abductions, which are very negative. And I think these are a real problem in the field, because our own military will basically attack a genuine contactee and use hideous methods of mind control and drugs and psychotronic technology to fake negative events. So this is a real problem.
That is a real problem. And when you talk to people, like an experiencer, I would always say, I don't know how much of it is our government. But I had, when my first encounter just like changed my whole life course, but I also had a lot of medical issues prior, and all of those were through the process of about 6 months, all taken care of, like against all doctors and like anything I was told that was the end of the healing. So I don't want to go too much into my story, but I get that I a lot. And I often wonder too, if it's a perception or if it's our government. Yeah.
And
Unfortunately.
I think honestly, there's disinformation agents who are both quote researchers and quote experiencers who really aren't. They
Right.
are agents who are putting forth a fear-based narrative. And I mean, there are some prominent ones in the field who I would point a finger at, and I'm not going to say their names, but I don't trust them. Now, I will say that, yeah, some people do have experiences that they perceive as negative, but it's so interesting to me because two people can have the same identical experience in detail. And one says, I hated it, they're negative, they're evil, I don't like them, I wish they'd go away, they've ruined my life. The other will say, you know what? It was the most interesting thing that ever happened to me, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So it's a very difficult thing to pin down. I did talk to a guy in England he hates it. I mean, he was pulled on board. They put a needle in his head. He says, these guys don't use anesthesia. It hurt. Now, pain will come up in some of these examinations. I talked to another lady. She was healed, but they put a needle type device in her eye. She said, that was the worst. I hated that. And gosh, I can totally relate to that. Betty Andreasen, she takes a very, positive view. They pulled her eyeball out and put it back in. This happened to another abductee. They cured him of color blindness. So I think a lot of these medical procedures that are very difficult for people are not experiments at all. They're healing procedures that you might not even be aware you're sick. I wrote a book, The Healing Power of UFOs, which outlines 300 cases. And it's from every major researcher out there who focuses on onboard experiences. Even David Jacobs, who's convinced they're here to take over, points out that he's got cases of people healed of diphtheria, of cancer, of pneumonia, a whole list of illnesses, as does Bud Hopkins and John Mack and Tim Beckley and Brad Steiger and Yvonne Smith and Barbara Lamb and Edith Fiore. I can go on. I mean, I'm not even finished. Michael Hesseman, Phil Mantle, Ray Hernandez, Grant Cameron, you name it. All these researchers have quite a few healing cases. So we really need to step back and take a look.
I have to say I do know of one well-known abductee who wants to be known as an abductee because she found it to be incredibly invasive and incredibly wrong, and that's Kim Carlsberg.
Yeah, I know about Kim Carlsberg. Her story is very interesting. And yeah, a lot of people, this is the main complaint with people. They feel violated. They feel a loss of control. They really hate it when their kids become involved. And I totally get it. If you talk to Kim, she talks about, having suddenly started channeling and having a whole psychic awakening. Same thing with this guy in England. Because I asked him, have you gotten anything good out of this? He's like, well, me and my wife are super psychic. We win these contests. We've got this incredible synchronicity. He's got this absolute amazing ability to do astral projection. But sometimes it's not worth it. I mean, I talked to a guy who both he and his wife were brought together. They're both contactees. He had these cat-like beings show up, and that was it. He said, go away, never come back. I will not work with you. And he never saw him again. So, I talked to Dolly Saffron about this. She says, yeah, people have a very strong fear reaction. And if you tell them you do not want to work with them, they will leave you alone. Often I found they'll come back at one point and check to see if you still feel that way. But yeah, I get it. I mean, some people do have negative experiences. Some people have had some health problems associated with it, gynecologically speaking. And there are cases where people have attacked, tried to shoot at an ET. There was a case in Brazil where a guy shot at a humanoid. Well, they shot back, and it did not go well for him. They hit him with a beam of light. He was very ill. So a lot of these cases of injuries, too, are people who walked right up to a landed UFO. Stephen Michalik, Falcon Lake, Canada.
Oh, he had that burned on his chest. Yeah.
Right. So there are injury cases, but the healing cases far outnumber them.
My brother was an experiencer too, and he got so freaked out he just shut down. He'll give me bits and pieces about it, but for me, I was pumped and excited, and it was a different experience. But coming back from it, there's symptoms. Like I almost feel like I felt like I had the flu maybe for a couple days. I had to put a grasp what just had happened. But once I made it through that, we kind of built a little support group among us. And once I made it through that part of it, that uncomfortable part, it was like an amazing experience. You know, it's give and take. I really do. I believe
There are
that
negative after effects. A lot of people have trauma and PTSD and nightmares. Light sensitivity is a huge thing among contactees. Insomnia, sinusitis. But these implants, I think, are absolutely health related, because I keep hearing that from people who've talked to ETs, like, why did you implant me? It's to monitor your health, it's to monitor your vital signs, boost your immune system, measure levels of pollution. It's not for tracking or mind control, as has often been speculated. I think the first-hand cases where people have gotten any information at all, it's usually along those lines.
What about the theory that some of the implants are used to return people to their correct lodgings from when they were first taken?
Well, there was a lady I interviewed who had her implant removed by Dr. Roger Lear. Just 2 weeks later, they implanted her again. And people have asked them, is this used for tracking? And they said, no, each person gives off their own sort of electromagnetic signature, and we can find you wherever we want.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, this is relatively a new field of study, even though it's been around for a while. The funds and the attention hasn't been given to it that it deserves. There's still so many questions and mysteries surrounding this subject. And there are people who absolutely swear it's not ET at all, and it's demonic, or it's intelligence that puts on different masks. I don't subscribe to that theory for a number of reasons. But yeah, we're still scrabbling around to try to figure out what's going on here.
Okay, I do have to address something. I need to ask Odessa to ask her question. Go ahead, Odessa.
Well, it wasn't really my question. Fred was asking if Preston has heard of ET experiencers having a severe case of vertigo.
I can't think of one offhand.
Okay.
No. So I don't know. No. Well, I did know one lady from Deming, New Mexico, who was suffering from really bad vertigo, and they came and cured it. I'm not sure that's what the question is really about.
The other question, I just realized what Tim was referring to. I'm so sorry. So I've been asked a couple of times if you could describe the feeling of the ship material. And the last case prior to that question being asked, you had mentioned touching the ship. So someone had asked what that felt like.
Yeah, a number of people have described this. There was this one guy, Tim, from Louisiana, who had this experience where he was taken on board. And that was all he really wanted to talk about, because he said this thing was smoother than glass. He said you almost couldn't touch it. His finger would slide across it.
Right.
There was another guy who came upon a landed UFO. There were no occupants in it. He went inside and he said this thing felt like dolphin skin. It was very smooth. And that rang a bell with me, because that's how Dolly Safran described it. She says it's actually really super smooth, and you can actually press into it. Now, people describe different things, because some people will say the walls kind of look like a dull side of aluminum foil with a slightly bumpy texture. Some will say that the walls are really white or pastel colors occasionally. But generally speaking, it's very, very, very smooth. And, even the outside of a craft, there are people who've gone up and touched them, and they felt like it was a soap bubble. You couldn't quite even get your finger on it. It would just slide across it.
Tammy Waite in the chat room says, I suffer with reoccurring sinusitis and have had many encounters.
Yeah, sinusitis is prominent among the contactee population, as is light sensitivity.
Yeah.
Okay, Drew, I'm sorry I skipped over you.
No, you're all right. Just want to, you're talking about the negative part of it. I think what people are having a hard time releasing the idea of is duality. Like there's a part of there's a part in the creation that duality doesn't exist, and we're only in that small part of it that does. Like once we get past that, I think that we can, start to understand more things. And I think that's the whole point of contact, disclosure, spiritual awakenings, near-death experiences, spontaneous channelings, all that stuff. Like I've had all that stuff happen to me. And the message that keeps coming through is lose the duality, lose the fear. Like we're bound by a fear of death, and a belief of duality is a concrete part of our existence, and neither one of those are true. So I'm glad that we share the same aspect, and that's part of I've done a lot of interviews, and when I talk to people, when I get their viewpoint on it, I understand it's very controversial. Some people's perception of the moment seems negative. Even Travis Walton, his initial account of his encounter, and for years he described as a negative encounter. And when I met him in 2019 at Contact in a Desert, I asked him about his encounter, and he said now he realizes what they were actually trying to do and tell him, and realized it was actually a positive thing. It was his perception at that moment. So I'm glad that we have, as researchers, as hosts, as people just in this field trying to get to the truth, we have that barometer to check. Like people that really truly have had experiences and are in connection with C5s and all these things will tell you that at one point the duality fades away.
Exactly. It's a pattern I see over and over again. It starts out very scary. It's funny because ETs come down and people are like, no, take me. I didn't ask for this. What's going on? But a part of them, we'll call it the subconscious, but it's probably the superconscious. It's the greater part of us. Asked for this, agreed to it. And I know there's a lot of talk about this. And some people are like, no.
Oh my God.
I agree with you. I 100% agree. I just hadn't.
Yes, I 100% agree as well.
Yeah.
A lot of us did it when we were as a kid and don't remember it. Like when we were watching shows, Star Wars, Back to the Future, just all types of different things. We've actually asked these questions in our mind while watching these shows, and when it manifests later in life, we forgot that we actually prayed. We actually prayed for this in a way. Some of us many times, and when it actually happens, like we asked for it.
Yeah,
that's
my
belief.
She was having horrible experiences, and then she started remembering all the missing time and waking up to it. And the ETs did a little celebration. They were super happy. She's like, "Wow, oh my God!" It changed the nature of her experience. I see that many times. Another lady, Pat Brown, she went to a channeler, and he was channeling Greys, and she's like, "I'd like to go on your ships if you're really an ET." And the Greys started coming and taking her. She said it was horrible. She hated it. She'd never experienced fear like that. Finally, she just got sick of it. She was so tired of the fear. She said, if this is actually happening to me, I need to go on board right now, and I want to take control. And since then, her experiences became very spiritual. They took her baby. She says that is one thing she's not quite okay with. Wow. But I've talked to people. Dolly's had this experience, and they asked her, and she agreed to it. I talked to a couple in Canada, and they had this experience with a missing fetus at 7.5 months. And the wife was absolutely okay with it. She says, I know my baby is fine. I know where he is. And in fact, she did get to visit him later in life. So that is another super controversial aspect.
If somebody takes my baby, it might be I might feel differently about it in that context. Yeah.
You might not. You don't know until you're there.
You're right.
I talked to another lady. She had the same thing happen 4 times. She's gone on board and seen them all grown up. And one came down and talked to her, gave her all these messages, basically saying if people should start disappearing from this planet, it's being done by us for the universal good. There's an earthquake fault that runs through the center of the United States that's going to go off at some point. Going to have a huge number of hurricanes that are much bigger than Katrina. Told her all kinds of stuff, that who you thought were angels was actually us. And this was her full-grown hybrid child that she gave up to the ETs.
Yeah, we definitely have to talk more for sure. I actually witnessed my wife about 5-6 years ago, I witnessed 3 grays come in and heal her, and because she couldn't have babies anymore after her first child, and now we have two children together. Over the past 3 years, we've had 2 children, and I watched the grays heal her, and yeah, we should definitely talk after after this interview. I don't want to hold up the panel anymore. Sorry for jumping in so
I've
much.
got several cases of people healed of infertility, men and women, by the way.
Yeah, they actually had me do it because I was sobbing and when they told me they could heal her, and I started tearing up, and they used my hand and touched my tear and used my finger to heal her stomach, and made a swirl on her stomach.
Oh, wow.
And they said that was the medicine, that tear, the emotion.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, sometimes they use technology, but there's a number of cases where it's basically more of a psychic hands-on healing.
Yeah.
Nos?
So many things. Where do we go from here?
Where's the end?
But before I give you a present, I need to ask, how long did it take when you would be traveling in the Earth realm of the astral plane? How long did it take you to get comfortable flying on your back?
Oh, not long. I was reading the books, and the early books I read said it's completely safe.
Yeah.
And, I started out trying to just flap my arms. This is not working.
I did when I was a kid. I did
And I had
that.
to learn how to use basically willpower, and you can do it in any position. I'd often fly Superman style, or standing, or do it any different way.
With me, it was that I was on that path from the very start when I was young. So, flying was not a problem, but whenever I would roll over and put my back to the ground or be doing a flip or something, I just got so uncomfortable every time that my back was to the ground and I was not actually facing the earth anymore.
Oh, that's significant because we all have fears, and when you go out of body, it's called the desire body because all your emotions come roaring at you. So if you haven't worked through the feelings of whatever it is, I'm not an angry person. Boy, I get so angry out of body sometimes.
Yeah, and as a child, there was no way I was going to be working through my fear of heights. That wasn't going to happen, right? But here's the thing I wanted to give you, which is, because studying the USOs is something that's important to you. When it comes to encounters people have had with USOs or UFOs that they've been injured, the most common type of radiation they've been able to identify is ionizing radiation. Okay. Ionizing radiation is a byproduct of ionic propulsion. And ionic propulsion is in future tech. NASA has 100 satellites over the Earth that are using ionic propulsion for staying put. And our fastest traveling object in space that we created right now is using ionic propulsion to speed past all the other things we ever made, right? So here's the deal with why it matters to USOs. First of all, the elemental material that's being used for ionic propulsion is water. And what you keep seeing these craft doing is recovering water, which is what they need for the ionic propulsion. The other thing is that when you use ionic propulsion, you do leave a trail in the atmosphere. All those ions got to go somewhere and do something. But the thing is, as human technology has come along and they've started watching those things, because monitoring ionic charges in the atmosphere is useful for tracking the development of storms. So now it's part of that stuff, atmospheric data, all of that kind of thing. So if you want to hide a ship that's using ionic propulsion, water is the best place to do that. Because whenever you have moving water, water coming into contact with water releases negative ions, which means all the waves, all the ripples, every single raindrop that hits the ground or hits the other water is releasing negative ions, making a cloud of ions to conceal the crap out of you.
Well, that's certainly interesting.
Just wanted to give you a few things to work with there, and
Well,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
well, I appreciate that. I do think that there's a lot more USOs down in our oceans than people realize. There was a case off the Southern California coast where people saw many, many objects coming out. So I think they do use it as a place where they can basically be covert.
Mhm.
Well, they actually are aware of the fact that we can't go that deep.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they're protected down there. They could have bases under the ocean floor
Okay.
bases. We couldn't get there.
Yeah. I think that's part of a factor of this. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't surprise me because there's a lot more of these encounters than I think people realize. If you look at, the UFO groups like MUFON and NUFORC, and over
Right.
the years, they receive anywhere from 10 to 20 reports a day. Now, talk to any researcher, and they'll tell you that 1 in 10, and I'm being very generous there, will report it. It's closer to 1 in 100. So the point is, if these reporting services are getting 20 reports a day, you could times it by 10, that would be 200. Well, times it by 100, that's 2,000 every day. So the point is, so many people are seeing this, but this cover-up and disinformation campaign to ridicule witnesses has led to a very successful result, so that people don't talk about it. So my point is, this is a lot more common, and so many people are having contact. And the more I interview contactees, because someone will tell me this. The guy in England, he says, when I go on craft, there's a lot of people there. He says, I think pretty much everyone has had contact. And I asked Ellie about that. She's like, oh yeah, they know about every single person. Some people have less contact than others, but they're certainly known by them. And at some point, everyone has some level of contact.
I've noticed that when I go out and skywatch, which I do on clear nights, like last night was beautiful. I mean, you could see all the stars. It was just fantastic. And sometimes when I go out and I'm able to look in the direction of the Big Dipper, where I have seen a lot of different erratically moving, different colored orb type craft or objects. I saw 3 last night, and they almost seem to respond to my desire for them to show themselves. In fact, I was taught a procedure where you project your thoughts into the night sky and let them know that it is safe for them to come down close to you, and that you should picture as if you're in their ship, seeing where you are, and bring them to that point. I don't know if that works, but I do know that I've seen them come lower.
Yeah, well, that's the basic tenet of CE5s. People use their little lights and stuff, which I think is helpful. Perhaps they'll flash back at you. I've had that experience, but ultimately it's consciousness. Remember, these
Right.
guys are telepathic,
Right.
and you can reach out to them telepathically and initiate an encounter. These days, you have to be careful though, because there's a lot of reverse engineered stuff out there, and our own technology is reaching to the point where it can start to do psychotronic stuff.
Right.
So I mean, it's a turning into a real messy situation at this point.
Okay, let's go down the panel and take last comments. Nicole?
Oh boy. You know what, Preston, and I just want to say thank you. Anytime I've ever reached out to you or to talk to you, you're more than what, you go out of your way to really interact with people and help people to understand. So I just want to commend you on that and all the work that you've done. And and Dolly. I know that she's not feeling well, but I love to see both of you together also. So I, and that note, I just really, it's just like peeling back the layers of an onion. Like every time I am in an interview with you, I just learn more and more and more. That's so fascinating. So thank you for your part in disclosure, and keep going. So, I'm
Yes.
cheering you
Wow.
on.
Very nice of
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Drew, you're muted.
How am I doing now? No, I just want to say thank you, Preston. I don't have any questions. If I had any questions, we'd take another dive. But thank you for everything you're doing. Appreciate feeling your vibe and the consciousness aspect. I appreciate your work, and thank you, man. Your inspiration.
Oh, thank you very much. Very, very kind of you.
Odessa.
Well, gosh, I'm not even sure where to begin. I'll start the same way everybody else is. Just say thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dolly, for being in the chat, for being part of our little group. I know you're not feeling well, as Nicole led on, but it was very, very kind of you to be here, both of you. And I really look forward to, I don't know, kind of like delving a little deeper into your books at this point. So we've put up links throughout the show off and on. If anybody needs to just scroll through the chat, you can find them right there. His email address is there. Please reach out. Absolutely 100%. It may take him a while. He's pretty backed up on email, but reach out. Absolutely. And thank you again for being so open and being so welcoming to all of us. Thank you so much.
Nos.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I just keep being surprised that there are so many people that get it, because what I see from the public doesn't show that. Right? This is it's really comforting and refreshing, and it helps build hope every time I see someone that's put the pieces together.
Oh,
You know the direction you're moving. You don't have to worry about doubting yourself. It's okay. This is the reality. Now, what do we do to help everyone else catch up? Right? All that stuff going on in the background. But what I want to ask you, just as a parting thing here, is when you're getting yourself relaxed and you're getting prepared before you actually start your astral projection, is there any particular music you listen to?
I have, I used to listen to the Beatles and stuff and classical music. Ultimately, I don't really do that. I've reached the point where I can just basically do it pretty quickly. I mean, it used to take me about 20 minutes of relaxing all the muscle groups. Now I can just go down and you learn how to let go, I guess, is a good way of putting it. But you can hear music on the other side, and oh my God, it's insane, the harmonics and the singing.
The wind sings.
Oh my goodness.
It's amazing.
Well, on behalf of everyone, I would like to thank a fellow traveler for coming to hang with us today.
Yes.
Gosh, you guys. Thanks for showering me with love. You guys are awesome. Makes me feel really happy because, I think love is the answer. We all just need to get along. We need to learn to just have fun and relax. Learn how to, use your mind, discern what's true and what's not. Because we're used to be the information age. It's now the disinformation age. We really need to go back to basics and just learn how to perceive reality on a very basic way. With all these, flat earthers, and I mean, it's crazy, some of the stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
So
we
let love and truth guide your actions. And thank you guys so much.
Yeah, we do have one last comment from the chat room from Steve Wolf. Darn it, Tim and esteemed panelists, my apologies for missing the show with the brilliant and profoundly exceptional individual Preston Dennett.
Oh, shucks.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And you probably don't hear it enough because you're used to getting kind of the negative feedback. So just know that you got people out there who are really cheering you on.
Yep.
Yeah, I see many familiar names. So hi to all you guys, Susan and Michael and Renee. I see you all there. So thanks for joining us.
To all of the people that got here late in the chat, you can always go back to our channel and watch it again.
Absolutely.
Catch up on what we started to chat about and how it went kind of awry in a different direction. But it was very interesting, and you will learn some new things. So please rewatch. I want to extend to you, Preston, and to Dolly, who's sitting back there somewhere, an invite to come back together on our channel. We would like you both to be on.
Yay. I would love that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because some of these questions, I'm like, gosh, Dolly needs to answer this one.
You guys work phenomenal, like together. It's just unbelievable how well you and Dolly work together. It's great.
We do have our own podcast, The Lightgate, every Monday
I know.
night.
There's a link in the chat. You got to scroll up a ways, but it's in there.
Thanks, Odessa.
Can you drop it again, Odessa?
If I'll find it, if I can find it that fast, I'll try.
If you can. Otherwise, it's on Thursday at what time, Preston?
It's Monday evening, live,
Monday evening.
6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And
Okay.
on United Public Radio Network. We have the Lightgate page on Facebook. You can find it there.
Okay. Where else can we find you?
I'm all over social media, really. Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, of course. Got my website. Just punch my name in. It'll take you there.
Okay.
YouTube channel, books as well on, Amazon and other online retailers. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find, and I always do try to respond. So if I didn't, feel free to send another email. I'm not going to be offended. I will try to respond pretty much to all queries.
Everybody go to Preston Dennett's channel and please subscribe to him and Dolly. We would love to get him up higher so his reach is farther with the YouTube algorithm.
Absolutely.
Give him a lot of thumbs up on all his video content, because it's the thumbs up that pushes the video out more through YouTube. So please do so that we can get Preston out even farther than he's already gone. Preston, you have touched everyone within the UFO community. The wealth of your information surpasses almost everything that I've ever learned in ufology. Thank you very much, sir, for coming on. I
And for
really
being so
appreciate
prolific. Like,
Yes. And
Yeah.
keep writing, because your books are very interesting and they teach people who don't know about UFOs something new. So please keep on doing that. We appreciate your talent. Coming up next week, we have a guest that was brought on by Nicole, Jim Goodall. He's going to be talking to us about Area 51 and what he worked on at Area 51, and maybe some of the secrets behind the gates at Area 51. So everybody, please come to see that next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And until then, good night from everybody on the panel.
Yeah, I know Jim is the. Oh, there we go.